Hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Nather, and I am on a mission to understand how young people see the world. You are about to watch an interview between myself and someone else who is under 25 years old about their worldview. That is their identity, religion, and politics. As you watch this interview, please keep in mind that in 5, 10, 40 years from now, we are not going to be the same people as we are today. And if we are the same people as we are today, then we have done a bad job of listening and learning to the people around us. So without further ado, enjoy. Hello, everybody. This is Annie. I met her like a week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, a week ago, I think.
Yeah, and she was a really cool person sitting across the coffee shop from me. And I said, "Hey, you." And so talked to her and some of her friends, and here we are. So, Annie, tell me a little bit about yourself, like 2 or 3 minutes. Just like where you're from, just...
All right. I am from Arlington, Texas.
Okay.
I grew up there. I have 4 siblings.
Okay.
So I have a twin brother.
Okay.
And we're the youngest of 5. I was raised Catholic. Both of my parents are Catholic, and one of my brothers is. I am not.
You are not? Okay.
I'm not.
But some of your family is Catholic.
Yeah, so I have a lot of extended family that's Catholic.
Okay.
My grandparents are Catholic. Most of my first cousins, aunts, uncles, both my parents, and then my brother and his wife are both Catholic.
Okay. So a lot of Catholics in the family.
Yeah.
Is it only you then that's not Catholic?
Me, my twin brother, and then my 2 sisters are not Catholic.
Okay. Wait, so there was only one.
Only 1 out of 5. And
1 out of
we
5.
were all raised Catholic.
Was it the oldest?
Yep.
Ah!
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my twin brother and I are the youngest. And we're the furthest removed, for sure. It gets worse as you go down.
Yep. I think, so sometimes what I notice is that it's like siblings will sometimes create their own culture. So
absolutely.
And the oldest is usually the closest in culture to the parents, and then it just gradually gets further away from the parents and more of siblings.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's definitely what it looks like in mine, especially because there's 5. So the gradation's like really obvious, and we're all really close in age.
Okay. So what's the furthest gap?
The biggest gap is 4.5 years.
Okay.
And there are 5 of us in 4.5 years.
5 in 4.5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there's a set of twins.
I see. Yeah. Because I have 3 siblings.
Okay.
And the gap between me and my youngest sister is 5 years.
Oh, cool.
So
yeah.
similar.
Yeah. It's everybody's right in there.
Yeah. So like.
And that makes the culture really intense too.
Oh,
like the whole sibling dynamic is just magnified, I think.
Yeah,
when
because you
everyone's
don't.
that close.
It's not like this. Like, I'm in high school, you're in middle school, and he's in kindergarten. It's like we're all in high school, all like pretty much at the same time.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Like I was in high school with 2 of my siblings and I was always in high school with one of them because I'm a twin.
Which I feel like is, to be honest, it kind of feels like a power move in high school. Or at least that's the way I felt. Like, because if you have multiple siblings in high school, then you can create your own. Like, you have more social pull as a
No,
set.
literally, you do.
Yeah.
And I have a twin brother that gave me all the social pull I needed, right? Because I was not very popular. Like, I kept to myself, but my brother absolutely was. I mean, he can talk to anybody. He was friends with everybody. He loved to party. Like, and so I got invited to stuff because I was his twin sister, which I was like, I will ride this wave.
So good advice, guys. Have a twin brother, have him be cool, and then get invited to all the stuff because of him.
Yeah, exactly. And then all of his friends will ask you out, and you'll be gay. And so it's going to be really weird.
Okay, so good segue.
Yeah, I thought you might like that.
Yeah. Tell me about, what are some key points of your identity?
My identity in what way? Like in...
So, what are the things that, if I was going to ask you, like, tell me in a sentence who you are, what would be the words that you would cram into that sentence?
Oh, see, I don't know, because I don't like to define anything too strictly, especially when it comes to myself. Like, I am very much about growth and all of that.
So you're very undefined?
Yeah, but I will say I have very strong like core values. And so I can talk about those a little bit.
What are the core values that you have?
So my main one is authenticity.
Authenticity, okay.
Authenticity is my favorite thing ever, because I know what it's like to not present yourself as you are to the world. And I also know what it's like to present yourself as you are and be okay with whatever that looks like and be okay with however that's received.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's really important to me. And I think it's different than honesty in a lot of ways. I don't like the phrase brutal honesty. I don't think I don't think brutal honesty is effective. Like I want compassionate honesty, like insightful honesty.
Okay, yeah.
Like honesty that is productive and kind.
Okay.
And so authenticity doesn't require 100% honesty all the time. It just means that I show up with the truest version of myself.
Okay.
Every single time.
What would be let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
How would you define the truest form of yourself?
Well, that's my soul.
Okay.
So I kind of look at it in terms of, I pull a lot of what I believe from different areas, but there's this Buddhist idea of the soul self and the ego self. And I mean, the soul shows up in everything, right? I also learned that in Catholicism. But the ego is concerned with I and how I identify and how I calculate and control and perceive the world. Okay. And my ego is important because it, allows me to exist in the world and it allows me to be functional and build a life for myself. But my ego is also what keeps me separated from other people. And so if I'm only in touch with my ego, all I care about is the comparison and the divide. Whereas like my soul is the observer, right? It's the part of me that is the truest form of myself. Okay. And it's the one that is observing all of the things I'm experiencing, and it's observing my feelings.
So now I'm trying to understand, is it a metaphorical, metaphorical language from, as in like your soul is experiencing your life differently than your ego? So the ego is more like the front and then the soul is the back end? Or is the soul literally like apart from you?
Ideally, they're integrated.
Okay.
So it often happens where they're very separate, but ideally I can show up with my sense of self, but also show up with my soul. Okay. Because my soul is what allows me to recognize the sameness in everyone.
So, and I'm trying to figure out, usually whenever I ask people more specific questions, usually they'll start dragging like what my question really is out of them. But one of the things I hear, and it's not just from you, it's from a lot of people, it's like self, soul, who I am, how I present myself. And then the question is, let's define that a little bit. Like what are the things that make you, and maybe it's easier to frame it in what are the things that make you different than others.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be, there are so many things that we have in common that sometimes it's hard to find those things. Although knowing just a little bit about you, I think there are certainly things that are part of you that make you different than, let's say, the mean or the average.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
So, just to kind of add like a little bit more structure to like, I want to know. Absolutely. It's good to know that that's the perspective you have on how you live, because that that tells me that you're very open to changing, and it sounds like you're not somebody who wants to conform a whole lot to how other people want you to shape yourself.
That's fair. But you want to know who that is and
I want to know who that is.
Yeah.
What is it that you shape and what is it that you shape compared to not letting other people shape you, and what is it that you're presenting that's honest, and what is being yourself?
Yeah. Ooh.
You said that you're gay. Does that mean like lesbian, or like do you identify as female that's attracted to to other females?
So, I actually don't define it. I have no idea how I would actually so I usually say
Okay.
like gay or queer or whatever. The reason that I say I don't know really
Okay.
is I've been in a long-term relationship for 3 years.
Okay.
And I have known her for 7 years. And she's kind of always been my person. And we started dating when we were 18. And it was kind of just always her to me. And so I never really explored anything other than that. I mean, in high school, like I did a little bit. And I would say that I probably have a preference for women.
Okay.
But I don't really know how to define it because I've never explored it.
So it
fully.
sounds like you're less lesbian and more like I identify as being attracted to this specific person.
And she and I joke about that all the time. So we're like, this is my sexual identity. Look, here she is. Like, but yeah. So I don't like really feel the need to define it because I don't know that that's super important to me.
Yeah.
Like the title isn't important to me in that sense. So I don't spend a lot of time exploring like what the specific label is.
Interesting. So you're not really yeah, because I was gonna ask you. I was thinking like, well, then how do you like define who you're attracted to? And then you're like, you let into it. So that was helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna marry her, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, cool. Are you planning on getting married, or is like okay?
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Who's asking who?
No idea.
No idea.
It's kind of just a plan. Like we know we're gonna get married when we can afford to do it.
Okay. Whenever you can
afford. That's the plan.
Like
you met her actually. She was. The one
Elena.
Yeah, Elena.
Okay. Okay.
That's my
cool.
girlfriend.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So. Okay. That's really cool. I'm curious because you mentioned Buddhism.
Yeah.
What religion or like what role does religion play in your life?
Yeah. So like I said, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
I was raised very devout Catholic, actually.
Okay.
I was very, very devout.
Okay.
And it kind of started to shift when I was in high school, but I have a lot of religious trauma. And so can
I ask you really quick?
Yeah, please do.
What religious trauma means?
So probably, so there are like two major aspects of like the struggle that I had with growing up Catholic and then how I experienced the world. And the first thing was being gay.
Okay.
That was incredibly difficult for me to learn to be okay with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of how I was raised and what I was taught.
Mm-hmm.
And, like according to Catholic doctrine, I can't, act on that. I can't be in love with a woman and be in a relationship with a woman and still be a practicing Catholic. And now I know that there are all kinds of things where people, there are all kinds of leniencies. And I think those are great because I think everybody should get what they need from religion, whatever that looks like. But it was really hard for me to get away from like the doctrine that was like, if you can't accept this, like, because the way that Catholicism works is like, if you can't accept 100% of Catholic doctrine, you technically cannot call yourself a practicing Catholic.
Yeah.
You know this. And so I'm
not Catholic. I'm just fairly educated on Catholics.
Yeah. And so that was really painful for me, that like the rigidity and the black and white and like the like I just felt like there were parts of myself that were unacceptable.
Okay.
And so that was really hard. And the other thing, it kind of goes along with that about Catholicism that was hard for me, was and now this is like kind of dependent on what type of Catholicism you're raised in and who raises you and what schools you go to and all of that. But the Catholic attitude toward pain.
Okay.
And toward self-harm and self-flagellation. And just the Catholic attitude about pain was really, really, really difficult for me.
What would you say the attitude was?
I was taught, or very not necessarily. I
let me actually ask you this, because this is something I hear from a lot of people, not necessarily in the interview, but this is actually happens usually on the outside of it, and I wish it happened more inside the interview, is do you feel like lots of the religious influence came from your parents or from people in the church that were separate from your parents?
That's a good question.
Because lots of people say, like, ooh, Catholicism, but really what they mean is, like, the way their parents taught them.
It was very much my mom and her parents. So my mom and my grandparents were very formative. I also went to Catholic school for 14 years, pre-K through
Where at?
12. So I went to St. Maria Goretti Catholic School in Arlington for elementary and middle school. And then I went to Nolan Catholic High School in Fort Worth. So that impacted it for sure. But I also read all the time as a child. I mean, I still do. I love to read. I love to consume information. And I read all the time as a child. And I mean, I read books by Catholic visionaries. I read, I read the Bible cover to cover. I mean, I read all the time. And so a lot of what I learned about Catholicism was from stories. And so I would say when I talk about like the Catholic attitude toward pain, I wouldn't say that necessarily, I mean, obviously I don't know what other people are taught, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like the generalized idea. Like I wouldn't say that probably most Catholics have that attitude toward pain.
But what was your experience though?
Well, I spent so much time studying the saints. And studying saint stories. And I was also taught growing up the offer it up. Is that a Catholic thing you've heard before?
Offer it up?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so there's this thing where when you're in pain in Catholicism, if you offer up your pain for the souls in purgatory.
Continue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like so it's like the way that tell me why you're laughing. No, please.
It seems so ridiculous.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, we have to talk about this. So it's this idea of like the souls. So in Catholicism, the souls in purgatory are suffering. Because they have to cleanse their souls before they go to heaven, but they can't actually pray for themselves. In purgatory, you lose that ability.
Okay.
So you are reliant on the prayers of people on earth, which is called the church militant.
Okay. In Catholicism,
like the church on earth, like living humans, is called the church militant.
Okay, yeah.
And it's about like the militant prayer and the militant good works, right? Faith and good works.
I could see how that would make me a little bit frustrated towards the Catholic Church.
Well, and so there's this idea where you offer up your suffering in conjunction with the suffering souls in purgatory, and it helps get them to heaven.
Okay. Is this a extra biblical idea? Like, is this in any of the religious texts that Catholics have?
I am not actually sure where that's from. So there are definitely, there are specific saints who received visions of Christ who told them this.
Okay, yeah.
So these are like saint visionaries who were told by Christ that their pain could offered up in conjunction with the souls in purgatory could help get those souls to heaven.
Aha. Okay.
And so when I was growing up, that was very much the attitude toward pain. And like, I mean, this was something that my parents focused on a lot. My mom mostly, and my grandparents, was any like physical, emotional pain, it was offered up. Offer it up. Yeah. Offer it up for the souls in purgatory. Like, this pain is good. It does good. And so like the idea that that pain is a tool, and in my head it became twisted a little bit, because then we get to like stigmata and self-flagellation and things like that. And I don't know how much you know about stigmata, or how much you've read about stigmata. What?
All right, so stigmata.
Stigmata.
Okay.
So stigmata is a Catholic thing. It's found in Catholicism. It's an affliction of specific Catholic saints, and officially it is. Okay, so stigmata is the wounds of Christ, the 5 wounds of Christ.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I have heard that before.
Yes. So the holes in the hands, in both hands, the holes in the feet,
and the
5th wound. So it's either the side or it can be the thorn above the eye.
Okay, I feel like it would be like always. To me, it would seem like it would always be the side. But anyways.
Yeah, some people did the thorn. So
gosh.
So in Catholicism, officially, that's a gift from God.
Okay.
Because suffering that puts you in touch with the suffering of Christ on the cross is noble suffering.
Okay.
And so there's this idea that like stigmata is a gift for the holiest of people, right? And the people who are most capable of uniting their suffering with Christ and offering that pain up for suffering souls.
Okay, yeah.
And here's the thing. I am not Catholic anymore. So in my head, that's directly self-harm, right?
Yeah.
That I mean, that's they put holes in their own body.
They intentionally would do that? Yeah, I know that there were some crazy people. Like, I know that in Rome, they had so many people. Well, this is a different kind of persecution. It wasn't people actually going and just doing it, but they're like, if you're a Christian, then we'll put you on a cross. And then more Christians came out of it, and they're like, we just have an epidemic of masochists. They all get pleasure from pain. It's just a whole bunch of mentally ill people.
But the thing about that is, like, any idea or concept that helps people come to term with pain is going to be appealing in some way.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so Catholicism is like, it's a way and Christianity, I mean, it's a way for people to come to terms with pain.
Yeah.
And it's a way to define what pain means and what its purpose is. Because like purposeless, ineffective pain is like one of the most difficult things to deal with, right? I mean, that is just like
well, I think most pain is purposeless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think the thing is like what we were just talking about, perception of it. Like, you can use, I feel like sometimes, and I don't put holes in my hands or anything, but I put the things that are painful grow me. But
100%.
Like, I as a Christian, I believe that that's part of the nature of dealing with the world that we're in.
Absolutely.
Versus like,
I believe that too.
And so I don't know that that's certainly not all of it. I think most pain happens because we live in a broken world.
Yes.
Caused by sin. But I don't think that, just myself, I don't think that's what God intended for us at all.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's not the podcast. Isn't about me. I should.
No, I love to hear it.
Yeah.
I think you're right that, like we talked about, perception of pain is so important, and anything that helps people adjust their perception of pain is going to be appealing to some people in some way.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on pain, and also, and you can kind of talk more about what you want. although I do want to know post-Catholicism where you landed. Like, where are you at
absolutely.
now?
The pain thing was always so intriguing to me.
Okay.
And like I said, I was very devout as a child. Like, I remember like praying for stigmata, because at that point I didn't know that it was self-inflicted, right? I was taught that it was a gift from God.
Okay.
And like, I remember like praying for that pain. Like, am I not worthy enough to hold this pain for these people?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's like me at like 7, right? And so and then there was this whole other layer of like the perception of pain in my family, and how that my dad has a lot of severe chronic issues. He's had like 15 spinal surgeries.
Oh, okay.
So my whole childhood, I mean, he was just basically bedridden with pain if he
Yeah.
wasn't at work. And he was on pain pills for a while. And he, was able to beat that addiction. But
Okay.
it was something that really affected the way my mom perceived our pain as children.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, like, my pain was always minimized, it felt like. And so
it's like, it's not as bad as your dad. What are you complaining about?
Yeah, and I kind of like, I was the youngest. I was quiet. I kept to myself.
Yeah.
So like when I was in kindergarten, I broke my arm. And I was at home. I broke my arm. I didn't tell anyone. And then they knew that my arm was hurt, but that's about it. It was the same week my older brother had an appendectomy. They put ice on my arm and moved on. So I went to school with a broken arm and like had to like, I mean, I like was, and it was my left arm. I'm left-handed. So I was like trying to write and like all of these things. And the school called my parents and were like, you have to take her to the doctor. Like, she's not okay. And I was like 5 at that time. So that's like one of my core memories about pain was like that, the minimization of what that felt like to me.
Okay.
And that pattern kind of repeated itself. So I'll get more to this in a minute, but I have a few genetic disorders. I have a chronic pain disorder. Okay. And so I was in pain all the time. Okay. And then I was a long distance runner. Okay. In high school. And it was my favorite thing in the world. I absolutely loved to run. And it was a huge part of how I defined myself then too, was being a runner and loving running. And it was my favorite thing in the world. And so, but that also, you have to put yourself in a lot of pain to do that. And I was like, let's do this. I broke both feet. I got stress fractures in both feet, which, and then I had apophysis in my hip, which is basically a stress fracture in your hip, which all of that was because of the genetic disorders I have, but we didn't know that at the time. I had to stop running. Yeah. I developed an eating disorder. So I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa when I was 17. Okay. And so I entirely stopped eating.
So you had a lot of pain in your life that, if I can say so,
please,
seemed like it was mismanaged by the people closest to you, which definitely skewed your perception of what the people closest to you believed. Yes. And the way they justified pain.
Yeah. And it's interesting now even to... and I can get back to this in a little bit, but it's interesting even to talk to my brother who's Catholic, my oldest brother, and talk about like the different perceptions of Catholicism we received. And like sometimes it feels like we were taught entirely different versions of Catholicism because of the way that we perceived how our parents taught it.
It could have been, it's not a could have been. Your parents were definitely in a different season or different that was the first one. So,
Yeah.
he
Definitely.
got to see a little bit different side.
Yeah.
Of
And
things.
also just our brains work differently, right? And so my brother and I function very differently, and we process things very differently. And I take things to heart much more intensely than he does. I'm very introspective and sensitive. So all of those things that I heard, I took and I turned them over and I analyzed them again and again and again. And that isn't something I don't think he did necessarily with those same events. And so, so when I was 17, I had an eating disorder. I also started self-harming.
Okay.
So
was that just like cuts or?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can see my arms. I have, they go all the way up. And so I was struggling with really severe self-harm and eating disorder.
Yeah.
I was hospitalized 3 times.
In high school or earlier?
So my senior year of high school, I went to eating disorder treatment twice.
Okay.
So I was hospitalized and did inpatient hospitalization, eating disorder treatment. So total, that was probably about 6 months in the hospital.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was 2 different places. So the first one was my first semester of senior year. I came home and relapsed. Went to a different treatment center. That one was further from my house. It was actually in Oklahoma, which helped me get away from the environment I had grown up in and like break the pattern a little bit. It helped me gain a little bit more perspective.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
No, please.
I'm trying to listen to everything. You said you were in Oklahoma. What was the reason you were in Oklahoma?
That was the second treatment center I went to.
Oh, okay.
Was in Oklahoma.
So it was a treatment center in Oklahoma. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, the second time I was hospitalized, they sent me to a hospital in Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, yeah, because, I know we're talking about something serious, but every time I hear Oklahoma, I always think college because I always think nobody has a reason to go to Oklahoma except for college.
There's a really good eating disorder hospital in Oklahoma.
Okay, so there you go. Second
Tulsa,
reason.
shout out Tulsa.
Yeah, second reason to go to Oklahoma.
No, literally. The only time I've ever seen people go to Oklahoma, it's either eating disorder treatment or school.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I did that, and it was a brutal recovery. So that was 2020.
Okay. Was that right around COVID time?
Yes.
Do you feel like that had COVID time had an effect on that? Was that kind of like the cause effect a little bit?
So I was really sick before COVID started.
Okay.
I was already in the hospital when the first shutdown happened.
Okay.
So it affected me in that I couldn't leave the hospital campus, which was really difficult for me. That, we were quarantined on the hospital campus, but it, as far as like my whole life stopping, like, because for everyone, like, we went to quarantine and everybody's life shut down. My life had already been shut down because I was sent to the hospital, and like I was pulled out of school. I was pulled out of everything. And at that point I was 18. So I chose to go to that one, actually. The first one, I was 17, so my parents chose. That one I was 18, so I went myself.
Okay.
And...
Were both of them in Oklahoma?
No, the first one was actually in Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what made you want to go to Oklahoma? Just getting away, or
so
just because one was here was full, or
I didn't pick the treatment center the second time. So actually, both times I didn't pick the treatment center.
You just said,
So I in eating disorder treatment, you usually have a whole team of people. So there's a physician and a psychiatrist, or a physician that does meds as well. Okay. So you have a physician, a registered dietitian who specializes in eating disorders, and a therapist who specializes in eating disorders.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, and there can be other members of the team, but those are the 3 primary members. And So they were the ones who determined that medically I wasn't stable enough to stay at home and that I couldn't keep myself safe at home, and I couldn't eat enough to keep myself safe at home.
Okay.
And so they determined the first treatment center. That one didn't really work for me. And I relapsed pretty intensely. I went back to school as soon as that was done at the beginning of like my spring semester of senior year.
Yeah.
Relapsed really intensely. And so the second time I was like, help me. And we kind of knew that the first one didn't work. And so my team chose the treatment center that I went to.
Okay.
They were the ones who got me in there.
Cool.
Yeah. And that was a really beautiful place.
Well, that area is pretty beautiful too.
Yeah.
So anyways, I really like hearing about, that's really good perspective.
Yeah.
I only know one other person that has like a legitimate.
Yeah.
To be honest, I hear so many people are like, I have an eating disorder. I'm like,
And
so.
that's the thing is like disordered eating and eating disorders are a different thing, right?
Yeah,
and probably 97% of the population has disordered eating to some extent.
Yeah.
But then there's an eating disorder, which is like the one step further, right?
Yeah. So I only know one other person that has like legitimate struggle with eating.
Yeah. So I fully recovered from an eating disorder in 2020. I completely recovered.
Love that. Love that for you.
So then at the end of 2020, I had a lot of trauma and that I still hadn't worked through. I was eating regularly. I was still really struggling with self-harm. I would call that a behavior addiction. I like genuinely had a behavior addiction. And it was compulsive and I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And so I was hospitalized again.
Okay.
This time in Arizona.
Okay.
It was a 30-day trauma treatment program. So I did really intensive different forms of trauma therapy for 30 days.
Okay.
Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was brutal. But it was absolutely wonderful. And that was the catalyst for my ability to move past all of that.
Okay. Yeah.
So by midway through 2021, I was fully recovered from an eating disorder.
Okay.
And fully recovered from self-harm and all of that.
So, at what point did you know, or did you like determine like, I am not Catholic, that's not what I want to believe?
So I kicked your light a little bit, but honestly, it was probably high school that I started really thinking about it.
Okay.
And like, I don't know if you've read White Noise by Don DeLillo.
Mm-mm.
Okay. That book, he was actually also raised Catholic, and he has very specific views about the way that Catholicism functions in the world as an institution.
Yeah.
And as it's fascinating, but I had never thought about religion and the way that he presented it. So that kind of started to shift my idea. But, I went to Catholic school, so I wasn't really exposed to anything very different than that until I got to treatment. So when I was really sick, I was kind of thinking like, I know that I don't believe this, but I don't really, like, I didn't have the space to explore it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really until I was hospitalized with people who were so different from me that I was able to kind of distance myself from that and be like, okay, I know that is not what I believe.
Yeah.
And so it was probably when I was in the hospital, and my third stay, do
you feel like where you're at is just not Catholic? Or did you move to something else? Okay, so atheist.
Yeah.
How do you define being atheist? Because you mentioned Buddhism.
I did, yes.
So, soul. Do you believe in a soul?
I do.
Okay.
So, yeah, I do believe in a soul, and energy cannot be created or destroyed. And that's scientific fact, right? So, I mean, I do believe that we're all a part of the universe, and that, when someone dies, our energy, feeds the universe and becomes part of that.
Okay.
And so kind of like operating on the idea of like the energy and how we connect with people. Like the most important thing to me is connection and love.
Okay.
And if there is meaninglessness to the universe in any way, that like we are what creates meaning, right?
Okay.
And
how would you say what do you mean by we create meaning?
I think that the connections that we form with people and the way that we learn to interact with ourselves is what creates fulfillment.
Okay.
And I try to be very intentional about the way that I show up for other people and the way that I show up for myself.
Yeah.
And I'm very intentional about like the way that I interact with the world, because it is so easy for me to concentrate on the suffering and the seeming meaninglessness and the chaos and all of that. And so I try to be very intentional about finding beauty and finding joy.
Okay.
And realizing that all of those things go hand in hand. And, and I think, pain can sharpen beauty sometimes.
Yeah.
And,
okay. So, you're definitely not a nihilist. That's like,
no. Yeah, definitely not.
Which I did not ever get that vibe from you. I feel like most atheists that I would talk to, they would be more nihilistic thinking.
Yeah. That doesn't serve me.
Being nihilist?
Yeah, that does not serve me.
No. I don't think it serves anybody. Actually, that's the only thing I've determined I am not going to post on the podcast.
Yeah.
Is nihilisms, because I think that there's I can disagree with people on so much.
Yeah.
And still have common ground on excitement for life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And if somebody's not excited for life, I don't know how to connect with you.
There is so much despair that exists in our world, like that I don't think like creating more despair or preaching more despair is ever the way to go. And I would always rather people walk away from a conversation with me not thinking that I'm right, but thinking that I love them and feeling loved by me.
Yeah.
And that's something I get, like a vibe I get from you too. And like I think like Christianity at its purest is that too.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
Yeah. No, I really do believe that, Christianity does not work for me, but I do believe that at its purest, it is just love. And it is about, the people around you, above all else, feeling loved by you and feeling seen. And like, that's what showing up like with my soul is to me too, is like the ability to like see the sameness in us and see what connects us, while also being able to talk about, who we are and how we identify and all of that.
So, this is like a big question. Do you think there's anything that happens to us whenever we die? Like, just like...
No idea.
No idea. Okay.
No idea.
No comment. You're like,
I do not presume to know.
Okay, cool. So, and I don't, this may sound presumptuous, but it seems like you have a perspective of, I'm living this life for this life because that's what I know is in front of me, and I'm not worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah,
afterwards.
I'm going to love as hard as I can, as well as I can, for as much time as I have, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, cool. So then, you mentioned like the connections and relationships and love you have with the people around you. Coincidentally, I think that's what I think brings a lot of meaning to my life. I think that's what I hear from most people, is that whenever I asked like the last question in the podcast, they're like, what has meaning to life? And I was like, other people. That's like the thing. Like the Muslim says it, the Hindu says it, the Christian says it,
it's the connection for everybody.
But the thing that I hear, or that I know that is different for all of those, is they all have different reasons on why that is important. So I know that most religions will have a similar answer on why that's important. Although as an atheist, I want to know why you think that is important. Is it just something that you feel is important, or do you have like a logical conclusion to why that is important?
I don't know that I necessarily have a logical conclusion. I think that that's pretty much all we have, that love. Yeah. You know, and I have really severe depression, which may have already been evident by the things that I tell you. Yeah. And I mean, that's something I still deal with. I have it.
Depression alarm goes off.
Depression, I know. It's a sign.
I want to move back, like you said, about your pain.
Yeah.
And your perception of it now. Is that the question I asked? That's the question.
It is, yeah. And it connects a little bit to what we've been talking about with like the love and the connection and and the way that I find meaning. And so like I said, I've healed from the self-harm and all of that. But like I used to put myself in pain because I thought I deserved it. Mm-hmm. My brain also craves intensity. So pain is an easy way to get that. Like I crave stimulation. I have ADHD.
Yep. I think that's most people who are young crave stimulation.
Yeah. And so, I mean, like, and I'm talking like stupid stuff. Like I want to swim past the buoys in the ocean. Like I just like need intensity, you know? And so pain can be an easy way to get that, which is part of how I always fell into that trap, you know? But I have chronic pain. I have a connective tissue disorder. And so it was a big adjustment for me to like learn that I didn't deserve pain and then still have to figure out what to do with the pain that existed in my body. Because it's hard to go from like, this is what I deserve. This is how my life works to like, wait, I don't deserve this pain. So then what do I do with it? Yeah. And so in that sense, like it was really easy for me to run from it at first and to try and shut it out. But all that did was disconnect me from myself and from other people. Yeah. Because, you know, when I think like really acute pain, you know, you do want to distract yourself from it. And that's, you know, how a lot of people get through it. When it's chronic pain, if you are constantly trying to distract yourself from it, you're distracting yourself from your whole life. Yeah. And so I found that I was less present. And so because I was constantly trying to run from the pain. And that's kind of when I started to look into more of like the Buddhist mindset of pain. Also, the reason I mentioned Buddhism with the ego and the soul was that was a big part of my recovery from an eating disorder. Yeah. It has a lot to do with that. But I started meditation around that time, and there are a lot of scientific benefits to meditation, with just mindfulness in general, which, you know, prayer is a form of mindfulness, and I mean, you can be mindful doing anything, right? But meditation and concentrating on my body and the way that it felt, I basically started to do biofeedback. And I started doing gratitude practices for my body. Yeah. And, you know, now it's kind of like the pain is a guest, you know, it's not necessarily a guest I want there all the time. It invades my space a lot and I get frustrated with that guest. But I also know that it's there and I'm prepared for it, and I am prepared to live in coexistence with it. And learning not to hate it was a big part, because then after I realized how much pain had derailed my life, you know, I really wanted to hate it for a while. And so then learning that like that hatred in any sense isn't going to serve me. And so being able to like thank my body for doing the best that it can with what we've got, you know, and it actually, that decreases my pain. I can feel a difference. Okay. And what also happens with that, what I learned was that, so, you know, your nervous system can only take so much stimulation at once, and pain takes up a whole hell of a lot of that. And so when I am in a lot of pain, I have a lot less capacity for emotional intelligence, for compassion, for even just receiving sensory stimuli, being around people. And I learned that when, you know, learning to live with pain, like I think contentedness is a practice. You know, even if this isn't what I chose, I am willing to be here with everything in me. I am willing to do this, even if I didn't want to. And that, like, shift in the relationship with myself and my body, I mean, not only changed my whole life, but it changed my politics, it changed my relationships with people. And so, like, that's when I really started to think, like, this connection is what we've got, you know? And, like, this ability to connect to ourselves and connect to the earth and connect to other people is, like, the only thing that has ever made me feel like life is worth living.
Okay. So, okay.
I know that was a lot, but
yeah, but it was good. The thing I think about, and it's the questions that sound accusatory and argumentative, but I am just honestly, I'm curious about.
I believe you.
Is the, like, you know, you say atheist.
Yeah.
Like, do you believe there's any like that means non-theist?
Yes.
So I assume you don't believe in a God.
Correct.
Okay, so you don't think there's a God out there?
No.
And do you think there's any kind of like supernatural? Is it like either energy or being or anything like that?
I mean, I 100% think that there are forces at work that we will never understand. And
okay, so wait.
Like, you know, as far as like energy goes, I mean, like, literally, this is gonna sound like a tangent, but I promise it's not. Like, the structure of water molecules changes based on the energy of the surrounding environment. Yeah. And so, like, if you, like, that's insane to me. Like, there is so much power to create and shift and so much energy available that, like, I have no idea what's at work. Like, and that's the thing is, like, I mean, I would love to, like, take shrooms and, like, figure out what the universe is about, you know? But, you know, I'm just, you know, and if there is a God, like, let's meet him, you know? Like, and that's the thing is, like, I really don't know. And I'm okay with that. But I do understand the impact that, like, energy and consciousness has on the world around us. And, like, have you seen, like, they've done experiments where, like, particles and light move differently if they're being observed. Like, our consciousness literally shapes the world around us. That's insane. I have no idea why that works the way it does. So, like, in that sense, like, you know, I call myself an atheist because I don't believe there's a God, but I think that atheist sometimes probably gives me a bad rap because like I believe in wonder and I believe in awe.
Okay.
And
So
I believe in like the power of the universe and the world around us that we like don't quite understand.
Yeah. Because this is what I hear, what I've heard from people, because I've gone to the atheist Christian debates that, you know, like there's like some
those can be exhausting.
They can be exhausting. Also, like there's a group. It's called like the Bible and Beer Consortium.
Okay.
You know, here in the DFW area, that does a lot of. They go to bars. They do the debates in bars. It's really cool.
That is cool.
And what always seemed to me is that people that would start out with atheist, they would always end up with agnostic. And so
that's fair.
So, because they'd always
That's fair because it definitely, like, I toe the line for sure.
Okay.
I toe the line, and you know, I think maybe I will be honest. Probably some of my commitment to the atheist is probably the ex-Catholic in me.
You just push. It's like
does that make sense?
I'm just pushing back. I'm trying to be like extreme on the pushback so that it's clear that I'm not.
And it's not even necessarily the perception that I'm worried about. It's mostly like the
internal,
like the internal.
No, it's the whenever I reference the perception, I'm talking about your self-perception.
My self-perception. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It absolutely is that. Mm-hmm. So I totally get what you're saying, because what I start to say sounds definitely more agnostic, because I'm like, who knows? And that's just agnosticism. Absolutely.
Because
but I think you're. Yeah, I think it has to do with like my own perception of Catholicism and like, because in my head, whatever it is, it's not that.
Not Catholicism?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'd probably, based off of your perception of Catholicism, I would definitely say it's not that as well.
That's so good. Yeah, no, you're right.
So
that's so funny.
No, what the heck was your... This is crazy. So it's like to be honest, like every bad example that somebody gives about why they don't believe in Catholicism or Christianity, you lived. That's what it feels like. Like, you know, like, oh, well, Christians believe, or Catholics or Christians, whatever. The thing that
the common ones that people hit.
Yeah,
I got every one of them.
You got all of them. So and you know, I always have to fight the urge to like persuade people. You know,
that's
like the natural
I get it. I get it.
Part of my religion.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a huge part of Catholicism is like the persuasion and the, you know, it has taken me a while to learn to not be defensive to that persuasion, you know?
Yeah.
So I totally get it. I totally understand the instinct there.
So, well, the thing is, it's just something that's so exciting to me, like at least the truth that I feel like I believe in, you know, I want other people to believe in it. I'm sorry that was your experience, because to be honest, I don't believe most of the stuff that Catholics do, but it's not that I'm like upset that you changed your way because of it, but I'm sorry that was your experience with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
It is.
Yeah, I heard a story. There was a guy that joined a small group recently that I was like connected with the people there. He immigrated from Jordan, and he tried to join a church there, but he was Muslim, so he had like a Muslim name. So whenever he went into the church, it was kind of like, and they were like kind of uncertain because it was a new person. Then they heard his name, and his name was Muslim, right? And they like beat him up and kicked him out.
Holy shit.
Yeah, right? Because, well, it's like an underground church. Like it's like a not, but that's still not anything that Christians should be.
Exactly.
But what's interesting is that guy felt so drawn towards Christianity that he ended up finding another, like going to another city to another underground church, saying like, I went to another underground church. I didn't rat them out. Like, I'm here because I want to be a Christian, and then like ended up moving here to be a missionary to the U.S.
And it's so fascinating, honestly, because like, and I think that's evidence that like, you know, it isn't just because I do tend to get frustrated when people imply that it's just my, not that you've done this, but that it's just my religious trauma that caused me to separate from Catholicism, because that's obviously not true, right? There are people that have experienced religious trauma and still are religious. But it's interesting because like, even to talk to my older brother, you know, who's less than 5 years older than me, he's Catholic, married, has a baby on the way. And you know, he and I have, you know, very similar worldviews, and that like pretty much all we care about is people knowing they're loved, and seeing people for who they are and loving them in the moment and doing the best we can with that. And he's Catholic and I'm not. And so, you know, we've talked about like, you know, it's interesting, like if my foundation in Catholicism had been different, how that would have played out. It's interesting to think about.
Can I ask you, what, how do you think we came to be? Like, you know, is that something like you kind of like put, you know, like shift off into the back of your mind? Or
I think about it all the time.
Think about it all the time?
Okay. I think about existential questions probably 90% of the time. Like they're just sitting in my head, like right here. I think about it all the time. I love ancient history. And reading about ancient history and evolution and all of that. And it's crazy because like I've read about like the DNA sequencing they've done on like the first hominins and the first humans and like all of first Homo sapiens, all of that, and like trying to figure out when it shifted from, and they've done, you know, DNA sequencing of like gorillas, and they're trying to find like the consciousness gene basically. And you know, so there's like,
well, let me ask you a more specific question. Are you like Big Bang Theory, evolution, we got here because of like
pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty
I was
much.
Curious, yeah.
But it's like even that is like so full of mystery, you know, that it's just fascinating.
Yeah. Well, the reason I ask is just because like I, you know, and you know, because I'm not, I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty, but it's something that I have always just been so like. It seems more confusing to believe in that, you know.
That's so fair.
Yeah, like
that is so fair.
Like I feel like I would have to have more faith to believe in that.
Like, yeah, no, and that makes total sense because, like, you know, Christianity gives you that certainty, right? And that's one of the beautiful things about it is it takes away some of that mystery of what is going on, what is our purpose, and how did we come to be here, and why?
Yeah.
And I think that's like, you know, I think most of the human experience is trying to answer those questions, either consciously or subconsciously.
Yeah.
And so I think when, you know, Christianity does answer that question for people, that's incredible. Like I said, I think everybody should get what they need from religion. And if it's like that certainty and like decreases that fear, amazing. Cool.
So transitioning, because I'm sure we could spend like 7 hours on this.
I believe that.
So, how does your perspective on pain and how we came to be, and some of the, you know, your the way you view energy and like our souls and ego and whatnot, how does all of that affect your politics?
Yeah. So I grew up pretty conservative, which I think usually tracks with the Catholicism thing.
Oh, yeah. Like 99.99% of the time.
Sure does. And I would say, honestly, I think that it shifted what I value in like every sense of the word. Like when I think about
what shifted? You said it.
Sorry, I was just processing in my head. So I honestly, I would say that like recovery from an eating disorder and recovery from all of that trauma like directly shifted what I valued about the world and what I thought I valued in politics.
Okay.
And so, and I am not as educated in local politics as I would like to be.
Yeah.
But
me neither.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to dig into.
Yeah.
But I do think that, you know, the way that we're taught to see the world and what we're taught to value about money and how we're perceived and like things like that, and just like what we're taught is valuable about the world has to it had to shift for me in order to recover from an eating disorder.
Okay.
In the sense that I had to, and this isn't even so much as like politics, but in society, you know, like the value placed on what you look like and how other people see you and the way that you're perceived and how much money you make and you know, all of those things. And it really had to, my perspective really had to shift to like, okay, what do I value about myself and what do I value about people? And if what I value about people is their souls and not necessarily, I mean, I value and like respect the identity, but like I think sometimes identity, especially in politics and like nationalism, it's just divisive, right? And so it shifted my politics in that I was very much like you said, like I identified as Texan, as American, and like those labels started to shrink for me.
Okay.
In the way that I defined myself in relation to other people.
Okay.
So it like created less division in my head. And so now in my head, and obviously like politics is deeply complicated, but in my head, the person is the most important part. Right.
Okay.
And like in like foreign policy and stuff like that, like, I mean, I don't think war is the right option ever.
Well, well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If there's a war happening on this side of the world, should the U.S. intervene to bring a swift end to that war or not be involved with it? Because there's both perspectives can be anti-war.
Yes, but what is a swift end? Does it mean going in and shutting down? Like, does it mean a military intervention or does it mean a ceasefire?
Well, that ceasefires don't that's not something that the U.S. usually has power
exactly.
over. Yeah.
That's my point. So like in that sense, like, then why are we involved at all?
Yeah, I personally believe that we shouldn't be involved at all.
We shouldn't be involved at all.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear you say that because I, like, and, you know, obviously there's the whole, like, the conflict in Israel. And we don't have to get into that. But it's fascinating to me, like, the idea of...
Well, can I ask you what your thoughts are on that just really quick, the Israel... Gaza conflict? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely horrendous. And I think a ceasefire is the only viable option. The thing is that you know, Biden has declared over and over his unwavering support of Israel.
Oh, yeah.
So has the UK. But there was this whole thing where, like, BBC got in trouble because they wouldn't call the Hamas group terrorists.
Yeah.
Well, the International Coalition on Terror, formed by the US and the UK and all of this, they don't even actually have a definition for terrorism. They cannot define it because every country's terrorist is another country's freedom fighters.
Yep.
And that's the thing.
Like one of the things, to be honest, I just wanted to state this. I'm like anti like war, conflict, killing people. Although I just because there are some Muslim people that there's like a Muslim guy that I interviewed. There are other Muslim people that I'm friends with that I follow on Instagram and whatnot. And the thing that like I hear from them is like what Hamas is doing is actually like the most American idea ever.
It
like,
is 100%.
Like it's just told
and that's
differently.
the hypocrisy in American foreign policy, right? Is that, I mean, and listen, like the Hamas ideal, like when they started to come to power, like in the 20s and 30s, I mean, it was like, we are the pyre that will burn our enemies, like for God, whatever. And, you know, I don't believe that violence is acceptable either, but that also, literally, like you said, the most American reaction to being occupied by a foreign country for 100 years.
Well, it was 1949.
Okay, so the declaration was September 11th, 1922, where the British Empire declared that they were creating a Zionist state in Palestine when they were declaring Israel, but it wasn't actually declared a state till 49. You're right.
Yeah. Well, because like most of the data is best tracked from 1949 onwards. Yeah. Where you can see the depopulation of Palestinians. And like, because two of my best friends are Jewish. Yeah. Like my best friends are Messianic Jew. So so it's interesting, like their perspective is because they have family that lives over there. Absolutely. And so they're going to have, because it was like basically, it's just a really sticky situation.
It's horrible on every front.
Because like, if you think about like having a whole displaced people because of the Holocaust and whatnot, that was like where they were functionally placed. And then you have two groups that have literally been at war for like 3-4 millennia.
No, literally, like they're the entirety of everything. Like
from my perspective, all of human history, like 90% of it,
history of conflict is this conflict. Yeah. And that's like what's so fascinating about it, right? Is that like, I mean, you get into the nitty gritty of like the British Empire having the ability to create a national state for Jewish people, which that like gets into a whole thing. And then like if you look at like the writings and the speeches that existed around the creation of Israel, like their prime ministers early on, and even like Winston Churchill and like stuff like that. I mean, like they called Palestinians scum, two-legged cockroaches. I mean, like heads of state refer to them as nothing. So U.S. foreign policy, get out of there.
U.S. foreign...
That's where you're at.
Yeah.
Our opinions on foreign policy is get out.
Get out. And
don't be involved. Stop pursuing conflict.
Yes. So moving... I agree. And moving on from that, more local political issues.
Yes.
One of the things that I am curious about, just because of, like, what are your thoughts on abortion?
I mean, I think that it should be available.
Okay.
I think that it's healthcare. The thing about abortion for me is that, like, I think it's a necessity for mental and physical health.
Okay.
I don't think that for most people is it a desirable option. I mean, I know people who have gotten abortions not because they, were not careful and then were like, oh, I'll just get an abortion, but because they like mentally and physically were not capable of having a child or even being pregnant at that time.
Okay, yeah.
And it was an incredibly traumatic... Everyone I've known that has had an abortion had an incredibly traumatic experience. It is so difficult. And I think that gets downplayed in the fight for rights to abortion, especially I think on the other side, where it's like, like this idea that people who are pro-choice and think that abortion is healthcare are like really cavalier about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's the case. I mean, it's horrible and traumatic and like deeply difficult to end a pregnancy. But I also think that it's necessary for mental and physical health.
Okay. Yeah, because the thing that made me so curious about it compared to like, because I am pretty certain I know where you land on like the LGBTQ stuff.
Yeah, you could probably guess.
I could probably guess. We could spend a little bit of time on it. No, I'm just joking. But the reason I ask is because you seem to have like an exceptional value on like human beings and interpretation of pain, and handling pain and being kind to other people. So that was one of the things I was like, okay, I wonder what her perception is of like, babies and fetuses and whatnot. So, and that was the reason that I kind of drew towards that question.
Yeah.
And I know it's a really difficult thing to look at.
Yeah.
The thing that's hard for me on it is, because I try to be a really understanding person. A lot of the time, and I try to think of like putting myself in lots of the situations that, like, if I were raped, like that, the thing is like even myself, I'll make the argument like, oh, it's a low percentage, and I hear so much of like from my side like, oh, why do we even count?
See,
rape?
but that doesn't discount the pain that those people are in.
It doesn't discount it, and so like you have to.
Statistics, I think. Sorry to interrupt. I'm just.
No, it's all good.
I feel like statistics are thrown around a lot in politics to discount individual pain.
Yeah, and it's like this individual is going through this pain.
Yeah.
And I, for one, cannot relate to what it's like to be raped and then be forced to have a child.
Yeah.
Or like the prospect of having my perpetrator's child.
Yeah.
And that's something I don't like that is not accounted for a lot of times. But then like you see, and this is for me. Sometimes I like see. And I follow the social media pages that are very, like against it and whatnot. And it's like, you see a baby that has been aborted, and you're like, that makes me cry. Like that.
Absolutely.
That was a human that was robbed of joy and relationship and connection with others, and just experienced pain. And so like, anyways, I've been trying to wrestle with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like I firmly land on one side. I would because I can definitely relate. There's some amount of like disconnectedness, loneliness, and pain that I can connect to with like a baby. To whereas like I can't. It's less connected with somebody who's experienced rape.
That makes sense to like the empathy is more accessible for the child, for the baby.
Yeah.
Like I think the innocence is, and I'll be honest, like I mean, because you're starting to understand how I feel about pain and individuals being in pain. It's a question I wrestle with a lot too.
Yeah.
I just don't at all think that. I mean, I think there are some serious issues that need to be addressed as far as like sex education and the population of children in foster care and things like that. I don't think that that criminalizing abortion will solve any problem. I don't think that any of those problems can be solved by criminalizing abortion. I think it makes it worse.
Okay.
And there are statistics that show that, abortion does get more dangerous. More women die and more children die when abortion is not safely accessible. And I mean, it's the same
like
statistics.
More born children? I know more women die. I know that's a thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not asking as like a critique. I'm asking because like
no. You're asking me to clarify.
Yeah.
I totally get it.
It's all right to don't know.
No, yeah, I don't, and I'm trying to remember like what I specifically read about this because I'm referencing something I read. Yeah, let's stick with the more women die.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, more women die, and it is significantly more dangerous but I will say that if we're talking about like pain, a baby that is or that's a pregnancy that is terminated, a baby that is aborted through a medical procedure is going to experience less pain than a baby that is aborted in a back alley with, like I think there's like more opportunity for humanity when it's decriminalized.
Okay.
But it is for sure true that, more women die from abortions when it's criminalized.
Yeah.
And that like,
okay. Yeah.
like, I don't know how you weigh some life against another life. Like, I don't know how you weigh like a baby's life versus a mother's life, right? And like a baby's quality of life versus a mother's quality of life and things like that.
Yeah. Do you want my thoughts on it? It's all right if you don't.
Yeah, please. I would love to hear.
Well, the way I think about it is, maybe it's the American in me, and Christian is like, the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, and I think that those, because I'm not like strictly pro-life, right? Our actions limit our freedom, and like if a murderer does something, then a murderer gets put in prison,
fair.
Right?
We are free to act how we want, but not free from the consequences of how we act.
Yeah. So a baby is like literally the purest, and it is literally the ideal example of like it has done zero to deserve any restriction of those liberties and freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness.
Yeah.
Whereas a mother has in most cases acted on their freedom, and like their actions have caused something that has restricted their, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Depending on how you define that. Yeah. And this is like one of the things with like the rape example is, let's say I know like the highest percentage is like 7.5% of abortions.
Okay.
The lowest percentage is like, 0.75% of abortions, which the most of them land in between like 2 and 1%. Okay. That's most. Okay. So, but being generous, 7%, that's like super generous. Yeah. Of abortions are from rape victims, rape/incest. 7% of abortions are from a rape/incest incident, whereas 100% of abortions ends with an innocent baby dying. Right. And that's the thing that elicits a lot of emotion for me. Okay. Is like that is somebody that didn't do anything to deserve, and there was no action they took. Yeah. To have that brought upon them. Yeah. Whereas like I think as adults, or even as children, like we suffer the consequences of our actions. That's absolutely true. I really appreciate that perspective. I entirely understand where you're coming from there. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's hard for me is I see so much gray area, that other 93%. Yeah. And like
the empathy for me is like women in difficult situations and people who end up pregnant in difficult situations and like the mental health aspect and like that really pulls at my heartstrings, and I have a lot of empathy for like the emotional distress caused by those situations for women. And so to me, it's just significantly more gray than that. But I totally understand that distinction.
Yeah.
It is a distinction that's like nearly impossible for me to make because of how gray it looks to me.
Okay.
And the empathy I feel across the board. And I don't think that I have the right to make that choice for anyone. And as far as like the criminalization of abortion goes, you know, in my head, like the statistic of like saving those women is so, that feels so big to me. Like that part feels really clear to me of like the, like, protecting the people we do have, and to you that's also you know, unborn children, right? So
well, like I have a 6 month year old baby, or some 6 month old baby,
so it's a really close to your heart.
And so like I look at that and I think like,
I love 6 months. That's a fun age.
I think you see some of the and to be honest, I don't appreciate it as much as it impacts me a lot in my decision, but I don't like using it as like an argument. Like, look at this picture, and that should elicit emotion.
That's fair.
But like seeing like the torn apart, like, because most abortions, like the babies literally get ripped apart.
Yeah.
Like, and there's not pain
if it's
relievers
late enough, right? If it's late enough in the pregnancy.
There, by the time they know, the earliest you can know you're pregnant, or like the because I think it's mainly detectable after like 6 weeks.
4
weeks. Yeah. Okay. So at most abortions happen after 6 weeks.
Yep.
You can't, the other more humane forms of abortion have to happen before that.
I have known people who've had a pregnancy later than that they were able to pass with like pills, like that they were able to
have like the like miscarriage kind of a okay, yeah.
So I know people who have been late. So I think that distinction is different, but that distinction is important to me as well. I think there is like,
well, like
but I understand like the later term abortions and
because and that's why I don't like the, like, for me the imagery is like, because if the imagery is what the argument is, then then it becomes about like when when it is. Whereas like I think it's conception, kind of like, so like the intellectual arguments I think are more important than the emotional arguments, but because a baby that's at 6 months looks so close to a baby, or 6 months in the womb, versus a baby that's 6 months born, is so similar, that it's like, how could, it's specifically like the people that are like performing it and like throwing the parts into the and I'm just like, man, it's like, I can't imagine being the person that like is not necessarily the mother, because I don't think they show it to the mother. That would be,
don't.
Yeah, well they don't. So that's anyways, which like to me, there's like two parts of that where I'm like grateful and also like ungrateful that is the procedure. Like, well,
No, I understand what you're saying. Like part of you is like, show them
like this is,
show them what they did. No, I understand that part. It's a really tough thing to talk about, just because there's so much pain on all fronts. Like,
Yeah.
you cannot have a conversation about abortion without addressing pain and the value of pain and how to weigh the value of life.
Yeah.
And those are incredibly difficult things to talk about on every front.
Yeah. Okay, so then foreign policy, don't like war, don't like us being involved with war.
Yeah, get out.
Fairly...
Stop corporate globalization.
Stop. Ooh, okay.
Oh, I could get into this.
Okay, are you like on the Trump chain of like, it's all China, anti-China? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
It's.
No.
I mean that. Oh, not. I'm not saying like you're a Trumpy or anything like that.
No.
But
I
like,
know it, but it sounds like it. When I say like corporate globalization, because there's a fine line, right? Because there's development and there's like.
Are you like anti-George Soros or? That's the only person that like I think of global economic forum. China and George Soros. That's whenever you say...
Interesting. That's not where I go at all. So
Okay.
corporate globalization, to me, I'm talking about like basically like the relief packages that the West offers to the third world. So primarily the US and Britain.
Oh. Okay.
I'm talking about aid or corporate globalization that is doctored to look like aid.
Oh, are you talking about like foreign, like government globalization?
I'm talking about like big dams, the privatization of water. I'm talking about like
Okay.
projects,
Understood.
like that kind of thing. That's what I'm talking about with corporate globalization.
Okay. So, what is the specific example of corporate globalization that you don't like?
Okay, I'm gonna go with big dams here. So
big dams.
Big
Is that
dams?
big dams? Is that a proper noun or is that?
It is a proper noun. Capital B, capital D. Literally, there is a committee that determines. Well, I'll get into this, but it determines like it's the size of a dam, and there are big dams. So this is a thing where we have the dams in the U.S. and in the West, and it has, been widely known among scientists and data scientists and all of that for many, many years, for decades and decades, that dams negatively impact the environment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They irrigate usually less land than they submerge. They elevate the salt levels when they back up water, they elevate salt levels, and usually it makes the ground unplantable. They've been linked to earthquakes.
Yep.
They displace people. And so that's been known.
Yeah, because there was a big, like the Arkansas River through, I don't know if you know about that at all, but like I'm from Kansas. The Arkansas River was like a big, massive, it's like a creek now. Like it has like the, size of like a massive river, but because all the way up in Colorado, they dammed it up. It like turned it into a creek all the way down through Kansas into Arkansas.
And it messes up like all of the ecosystem that relies on that river.
Yep.
It messes up everything. Well, when they started to learn this, they were like, okay, we can't keep building big dams here. What they did is they took all of those massive corporations and the lobby groups that were making money from these dams, and they presented them to countries in the East as relief packages. And so this has happened in India really, really, really intensely, where they send over these relief packages, and it's these massive dams that they say are going to provide water to people. And so the U.S. government was involved in building like a series of, I think by 2000, there were almost 400 big dams in India.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
They dammed up all of the major river systems. They displaced 500,000 indigenous people, Adivasi people, and they disappeared from the records. It was a government-sanctioned genocide.
Whoa. Okay.
500,000 Adivasi and Dalits, who are the lowest caste system in India, literally disappeared. They died. They drowned because they refused to leave their homes. They they didn't give these people land. They didn't. And
man, okay.
And I mean, so India is supposed to be like the biggest democracy in the world, and it's supposed to be, oh my God, I know.
Yeah.
And it's, that's the face I would make too. And it's supposed to be, like super westernized and globalized. And, a quarter of their population doesn't have clean drinking water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, like, they're...
Well, that's hard with, like, what is it, 1.1 billion people or something like that? Like, that's...
But why are you damming rivers, then? Like, if all of those people, like, don't have water and these dams irrigate less water than... or irrigate less land than they submerge. They destroy these villages. They make the land upriver unplantable because it's salinated. They destroy the ecosystem downriver because it doesn't have enough water. And it's a money project.
Okay. So, big dams, how they affect... And is that something like we have any power to vote over or know of?
Here's the thing is, like, so much of that stuff is, like, nearly inaccessible in Western media because it's not covered. I mean, no Western media talks about the extent to which the United States is involved in developing countries, but not... Like, I mean, they say they're providing development aid, right? But what they're actually doing is putting money in the pockets of their lobby groups and their big voters who are making money from these things. And they are killing and displacing millions and millions of people.
What do I do? What medias do I follow or organizations do I sign a petition to? Or to be honest, I wouldn't give money, but like, what things do I do to naturally like cause any effect at all? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Man,
and this is something sucks. I know. This is something I think about a lot of, like, how do I do this? Like, how do I take this information and the way that I see the world and the pain that I want to acknowledge and bring to light, and like genuinely, how do I do that? And like, the way that I know about that, I have read material, so I for some reason know a lot about the government of India and like the Big Dam project and all of that. I picked up a collection of essays by an Indian author. Okay. And she's an activist in India, and she has written a series of essays about American foreign policy in India and the Indian government.
Sounds like you care a lot about Indian politics based off of these.
Now I do,
now
right?
I do. Yeah,
because I didn't know anything about it, but it has opened my eyes to like this area of politics that I didn't know anything about, like the development aid in Asia. And I mean, it's happening all over. It's happening in Africa. It's happening. You know, but like
there's more. I will say there is just, and not from like I know like the nitty gritty, but from people I feel like are reputable. There's a lot more destruction coming in this current age from China to other countries. I know in the past, certainly America has been that.
Yeah, I don't actually know enough about
well, do you know
way that China.
Do you know about like cobalt mines in the Congo and in Africa and whatnot?
Yes.
Okay, so
I know a little bit.
So China is the primary purchaser.
Yeah.
For lots of that, so they come in and they basically say, "Hey, you must sell us X percentage of how much you harvest, and we'll build you roads and infrastructure and whatnot." And then they don't regulate how it's harvested, so there's just people literally digging by hand with shovels miles down to the ground.
Oh my God.
And it's causing like their disorder rate like per birth is like it's something crazy like 71%. Like cleft lip and all that kind of stuff because there's so much toxins in the water, and they don't come home and they don't have showers to wash themselves from being in the caves. There's no ventilation. That they'll go down 3 miles into the earth by hand dug tunnels.
Yeah.
They'll be down there sometimes for like a day or two.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh
no
my
ventilation, no like it's just hot,
inhumane.
humid. Yeah. And then China, they know that they're going to, and they literally purchase it at like 2 to 5% of what they sell it for. Right?
Yeah.
Like they have exclusive rights to buying the material from them, and it's like the most valuable resource on the planet right now. And they're going and targeting these countries that have deposits of it.
Yeah.
And it's not something America is doing because, to be honest, lots of America knows that it's actually bad for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I think we have learned from some of our mistakes.
Okay.
At least with the going in and helping countries.
Yeah.
It actually causes a lot of destruction. With
sure does
their internal like if they can't, because we leave them without being able to help themselves essentially. Like there's a lot of that too, and
and like this hasn't even touched on the Middle East, right? And the U.S.'s involvement in the I know
we are there for their oil. Wait, is it
literally?
That's one of my favorite. I don't like Donald Trump as a person, although it was my favorite thing he ever said on the news. Like there was they were like so. Because he was like basically saying we're gonna leave and whatnot. Yeah. He's like, yeah, we're gonna leave, these countries, but we're gonna leave enough there so we can get their oil.
That's the thing about he was so blunt about it. Like he literally was like, we're in the Middle East for their oil.
And it was like this thing. It was like catastrophic because like everybody was like, or all the media was,
you shouldn't say that. You shouldn't be saying that. Well, because that's the thing is like if you reveal that. The motivation behind pretty much every war America has waged in the last 70 years is money.
Yeah. Well, the the Ukraine conflict.
Yes.
To be honest, I'm gonna go out here. I'm not like firmly, but I'm relatively on the side of Russia, because like the States, they discovered massive oil deposits. And there's like a whole bunch of stuff coming out on Zelensky and whatnot about like corruption. Like they've been embezzling money essentially from the government, and the Ukrainian central government was going to take money from the localized governments from these oil deposits that were found.
Okay.
I think it was Crimea.
Yeah.
Back in 2014,
they
found out about these. It was like $2 trillion worth of oil that they found. And Ukraine, like the centralized government, was going to come in and basically skim all the profits off of it. They said the people who lived in Crimea were like called Russia, said, "Hey," made a deal with them. Come, we'll join Russia so that we can keep more money for ourselves, rather than Ukraine taking it all from us.
Yeah.
And Russia said, no problem, we can do that. And then it was like, that was why there was no local pushback in Crimea from...
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did you access that information? Because I don't think that information was readily available. Well, I didn't experience it as being so.
It's, I take a lot of care to follow news. So you just log in from an IP address from another country and look at news coverage in Europe or the Middle East.
Okay.
Right? Because if you log in from an American IP address,
you're gonna get
the American
the American media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
can kiss my ass.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's the thing. Is like if you look at like the German media coverage of the Israel Gaza.
Yeah.
And so like German, French, the Al Jazeera, the Egyptian news, and all they all have vastly different perspective of it. Even like the European ones.
The American media is constantly protecting American interests.
And mainly because it's all owned by secular Jews. Like they're majority shareholders in most media companies. So, so, you should look at it.
But that's like, I mean, that's true about the American media in every conflict and in every, I mean, like if you, if we're talking about like the coverage of the Israel-Palestine conflict, I mean, the American media is protecting American interests, which are Israel, right?
Yep. And so the Russia one is interesting because Crimea set an example, and then guess what Ukraine did in response to that? There's only one fresh water source leading into Crimea.
Did they?
They dammed it up. So water bottles cost like the equivalent of $5 to $7. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Costs like $5 to $7 per water bottle there. So
type of the privatization of water. That's so insane to me.
So then you look at that perspective, and then there was more oil deposits found by those the eastern states, provinces, and Ukraine was going to come in and do the same thing. Ukraine had a treaty to not be part of NATO, but they were attending NATO meetings.
Yeah.
Then they also told they were also raising their tariffs on the pipeline that Russia was traveling their oil to Germany and France to. So they bump up tariffs. Then those eastern provinces, they saw what happened in Crimea, and they made a phone call. And it's basically like the equivalent of driving. Think about it this way: have you driven across the Oklahoma-Kansas border?
Yes.
That's the Eastern Ukraine Russian border.
Yeah.
And then
it's like the Northern Ireland border. Like it's just.
And imagine, the Texas Oklahoma border.
Yep.
That's where the provinces that called Russia was Oklahoma City.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But they needed to get to the Oklahoma-Texas border where there was a river.
Okay.
To secure the land essentially. So they went up to the river so that they couldn't just drive tanks into land, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
And they also went down into they opened up that dam.
Yeah.
That was another thing they did. So they opened up land because the population of Crimea went from like 2.1 million to 700,000 because of the price of water and the inavailability of water.
Did they leave or die? Or
they
both?
left.
Okay.
They left. There was the death is uncertain about,
I'm sure, yeah.
But basically it was suffocating the country, right? And impoverishing it. So because literally their water was shipped to them, and it wasn't being shipped by Ukraine, right? So they had to like boat it in. And so anyways, just crazy.
And like that's the thing that's like insane about stuff like this is like again, we get because the U.S. is sending money and weapons to Ukraine, we get the whole thing where it's like, Ukraine, like, go, and it's like, well, it's infinitely more complicated than that. They stole water from an entire population of people. Like, neither government is in the right here. This is what, like, ceasefire. Like, come on.
Yeah. Well, it's, to be honest, I understand a lot of times why war happens.
Absolutely.
And in the Israel-Gaza one, I feel like it's more pointless, in my opinion.
Okay.
The Russia-Ukraine one, I'm kind of like, I think this needs to be settled out.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I understand why war happens 99% of the time, right? I mean, it's reactionary. I mean, that's how it works. And so there always is a justifiable reason, right? But I think that that's why it's so important to avoid it.
Yeah.
Or to end it, is because it can be justified in every sense of the word. And every time it's like, well, okay, this is the conflict that's going to get us our freedom. This is the conflict that's going to do.
Yeah.
Like, at what point do we actually just stop the conflict and say conflict begets violence begets violence?
Yeah.
Like, at what point do we stop and say, okay, like...
It's unfortunate that corrupt politicians are willing to sacrifice their citizens' lives for money for themselves.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is, Joshua.
Okay.
We got to wrap up, don't we? Yeah.
I think we covered the meaning of life.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, also, if I asked you again, it would be too long. So
true.
The last thing, this is what I close with
Okay.
every interview, is what is something you would encourage people to think about or ask themselves?
That's a great question. I like that. I would say my biggest thing is be curious. Like, don't accept anything as truth unless you... I mean, and I'm not saying don't accept anything, as truth at all, but as far as, like, receiving information and taking it as truth immediately without any sort of exploration, like, my biggest thing is be curious. Like, what are you consuming, and how do you interact in the world? And how does what you consume affect the way you interact in the world and affect the way that you treat people and what you value? So my biggest thing is curiosity. Like, and someone who is well informed and believes what they believe, great. Be curious. Figure out what's going on. Don't be satisfied ever with what you're told. Especially, I think in America, it can be very, very dangerous to be satisfied with what you're told. And I think so much of our problems and our conflicts and the polarization in America is due to being satisfied with what we're told. So I think be curious.
Yeah.
Be curious. Be curious about people and what they believe. Be curious about the information you consume.
Okay.
Just be curious.
All right. Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. It was really wonderful talking with you.
It was lovely to talk to you. I had a great time.
Yeah, me too. All right. I'll see you guys next Saturday.
Bye.
Here we are at the end of the video. Since you're here, you might as well consider liking and subscribing. Always remember to keep on seeking to understand and love the people around you. I'll see you next Saturday, guys. Bye. Coffee.
Yeah. I'll take a sip too. Okay.
That's interesting. Have you had this already?
I have not. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't.
You don't like it?
No, but it kind of woke me up a little bit, which is what I asked for.
Yeah, it'll definitely keep you engaged.
That's what I'm talking about. This thing looks so good. It looks so good.
It's a gorgeous drink.
Why can't it just... Every drink they have here is like that, though.
I know. It's so funny. It's like average coffee.
I think average is just generous.
Okay, fine. Subpar.
So it's not the worst.
It definitely is not.
It's subpar. That's what it is. In my book.
Yeah. That's so fair.
So I whenever I go to like a mom and pop or like a local coffee shop like this, honestly, I expect it to be just a tiny bit better than Starbucks.
Yes.
This does not deliver on that expectation.
Yeah,
Maybe I just start taking my interviews to Starbucks.
No, but the vibes.
It's so good.
No, exactly. Yeah. They like nailed the vibes, and then they were like, the rest is fine. Yeah. Okay, can you ask me a direct question again, now that I've had some time to sit?
Direct question again, as in, like, what is yourself, or...
Either a direct question again, or a more specific version of your question.
Okay.
Either way.